Seems the numbers are rising.
People will keep on joining, Sugit. I think you begin.
All right.
They can all join. Okay.
All right. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to this webinar being held by the Sustainable Habitat team from Center for Science and Environment. Today, we'll be taking up the issue of cool schools addressing heat risks in students. I believe most of you would have already sort of experienced this firsthand in this country that episodes of heat are rising and seems like they're here to stay for a long time. Episodes of heat will keep rising, and that has brought a lot of discomfort and heat stress to people. While we were addressing this issue, what we also sort of understood was that children are one of the most vulnerable groups because of this heat, rising incidence of heat. And in this webinar, we'll talk about how children are more vulnerable. We'll talk about CSE study, which sort of defines different stages in which children can feel discomfort during their school timings. And in the end, we'll also talk about solutions, and we also have experts who would be able to share their first-hand experience of what their own schools are going through. All right. With that, I'll hand it over to Nimish, who can sort of continue with this conversation and tell us about CSE study, and we'll come back later.
Sure. Sure. Thanks, Agit. So good evening, everyone. So we already have been experiencing that past 2 years or past couple of years, the heat has been on a rise. And 2023 officially was the Earth's hottest year ever recorded. So since February 2023 to January 2024, if we consider as a single year, it is the only year wherein the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark has been breached. The average global temperatures has risen by 1.52 degrees Celsius. Now, according to World Meteorological Department, there is a 47% likelihood that the global temperature over the next 5 years, wherein we consider the current year as well, will actually rise more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial era. And the heat waves we have been experiencing then that they have been more frequent these days, plus the intensity has been increased. So after 2030, it is estimated or it is anticipated that around 160 to 200 million Indians would be exposed to extreme heats every year. And the frequency of these severe heat waves in India is expected to increase by around 30 folds by the year 2100 if a 2-degree warming scenario is there. And if we consider a business as usual scenario, the heat wave frequency will be or might increase by 75 folds. Now, extreme heat is actually here to stay. So what we want is CSC actually conducted a 9 cities analysis wherein we considered the summer months for past 10 years. And what we understood is that out of these 9 cities, five of them have around 80% of their areas engulfed under the extreme heat. With these much areas, we identified that the number of schools in each of these cities, and we can see that in Delhi there are 5,691 schools, Jaipur has 9,247 schools, and Kolkata has 6,229 schools. Most of these schools would definitely lie amongst these heat-stressed areas, and the number of students that are affected or that might be under heat stress are also in millions. So this actually impacts the health and well-being of these students. Now, children are actually more vulnerable. So the climate crisis is actually increasing rapidly, and the heat waves have now become longer. They are stronger, they are more widespread these days, and they are more frequent. When we talk about UNICEF, a heat wave, as per UNICEF, is a period wherein 3 days or more experience maximum temperature each day, like in the top 10% of the 15-day average. So these definitions actually vary with different organizations. In India, it is something different, wherein I'll talk about that in the later slides. So at present, around 559 million children, based on this criteria by UNICEF, are exposed to an average of 4.5 or more heatwave days per year. And it is expected that by 2050, in any scenario, like 1.7 degree warming or maybe 2.4 degree warming in various scenarios, almost 100% of the children, which is around 2 billion children, will face more and more heat, even in the low gas emission scenario, like we told. Now, children in particular are actually very sensitive to these hot environments when we compare to adults, as they have different rate of heat exchange with the environment, and they respond very differently to the hot conditions due to their physiological as well as their behavioral factors. So some of the factors are high surface to body mass ratio, wherein this leads to increased absorption of heat. Their metabolic rate is higher, which actually results in increased production of heat per mass body, and inferior thermoregulation. So their sweat glands are actually underdeveloped at that point of time, and they have lower sweat rate. So because of that, they cannot regulate the body temperature, which results in lower evaporation heat exchanges. Then the height of the children, actually what we say is that the height of the children are closer to the ground, which makes them more susceptible to thermal impact of the surface temperatures. In terms of skin, children's skin is more sensitive when compared to adults, which makes them actually more vulnerable to the direct exposure of sun. And in terms of physical activity, we all know that children are more engaged in all the physical activities, something like playing sports or just running around the fields and different sports or anything. So which actually results in higher metabolic heat production. Now, a prolonged exposure may put children at a greater risk, and failure to remove these excess heat could actually affect them in terms of health as well as in their behavior. So, in terms of health, when we talk, they can face dehydration, high body temperatures, rapid heartbeat, cramps, severe headaches. And in terms of learning, when we talk, they have a slower cognitive function and an impaired concentration. So there is another way wherein we say that it's not just the temperature, it is again the humidity as well. So we have all been listening to something called it's not just hot, it's sticky hot. So that actually means that the humidity also plays a crucial role in defining the thermal comfort. So when we have higher humidity levels, actually the atmosphere around us is saturated with water vapor, which doesn't allow our skin to sweat, which actually results in lower evaporative cooling, or further it is believed that we start having thermal discomforts. So heat index is something which actually integrates air temperature and relative humidity to estimate the human perceived equivalent temperatures. So mostly in your mobile phones, you must have seen that the temperatures are 35 degrees Celsius, but you see another term called real feel of temperature. So that real feel of temperature actually incorporates couple of more parameters, something like humidity and the wind speed, and then it tells you that what actually the temperature is perceived as. So these are different heat ranges which actually corresponds to various caution provided to the humans. So 27 to 32 is caution, then it is extreme caution, danger, and extreme danger. So which each of the categories, the health impacts becomes worse. Now, CSC again analyzed this heat index particularly for Delhi and other cities also. I'm just presenting it for Delhi. And we have done it for a 10-year analysis. And we have done it for the summer months, basically from May to September. Out of these, what we consider is that May to June are the vacation months, usually. And from July to September, these are the working months. But here in the figure itself, if you could see that the extreme caution days and the danger days, they have been higher sometimes in July, August, and September also. The extreme caution days are extremely high. It's around 23 or 24 days in the month of August and September. So overall, for summarization, it is something like nearly every year I had at least 10 days per month, which are classified as extreme caution days. The number of extreme caution days over the period of July, August, and September, it varied from 42 to 70 days per year for the 10-year analysis. And moreover, there were several days that were actually classified under the danger category also, which have been higher in the numbers. So these are just to provide an information that how these days have been varying. And you can see that these bars have always been higher, even in the working months for the past 10 years. Now, what CSC has identified, like Sugit told, we have identified multiple stages of discomfort at school. So these could be while a commute from home to school, it could be at school, it could be in the classroom, and it would be when we commute back from school to home. So we'll go one by one in these categories and understand what could be the probable impacts of heat. So the first one is in terms of commute. So seven different schools from Delhi NCR were selected by CSC to investigate the issue of heat. These are the schools. So there is a criteria wherein they say that if the home is within the 10-kilometer radius, then that particular student's profile would be rated or given some higher number of points. And in terms of when you are getting selected for that school, particularly for admission in the admission criteria. uh, so what we did actually is we considered these schools, and we considered 10-kilometer buffer from these schools, and we assume that average trip length, the total from wherein the bus picks up the first student and reaches school, is approximately 1 hour, or maybe slightly less, maybe slightly more. So how we identified? We took surface temperatures for various years, like 10 years, from the satellite data. We extracted the built-up area from land use maps. Then we took wherein the temperatures were more than 45 degrees Celsius. The surface temperatures, please mind, not the air temperature. Surface temperature is something, the temperature that you feel when you touch the surface. So that is the surface temperature. And wherever the surface temperatures were more than 45 degrees Celsius recurrently occurring for 6 or more years out of the 10-year analysis, those pixels were identified as the heat stressed areas. So this kind of analysis was performed for these 7 schools, and it was identified that all of the schools had at least 32% of their surrounding radius of 10 kilometers under that heat stress, which actually went till 84% in case of the maximum heat stressed areas. So this actually means that the person who's sitting from the starting, or I can say the first student who gets into the bus, would be experiencing higher and higher heat throughout their journey. Now, the other stage is at the school. So the transition from bus to classroom, or maybe from the morning assemblies, may actually result in sudden temperature changes, which may be more pronounced when we use the air conditioned buses. And this actually could be a difference of 15 to 20 degrees, which actually creates a phenomenon called thermal shock. Now, some of the issues that are related to thermal shock is it's prickly heat, then heat related swellings. It could be heat cramps, exhaustion, stroke, nauseous feeling, vomiting. So these are some of the issues which actually is caused because of thermal shock. Then another thing is in the other outdoor activities, such as like morning assemblies, direct sun exposure is there. So we keep on hearing a couple of times that so many students actually faint during the morning assemblies in summers. Plus, during the play period, if they move from AC classroom to outdoors, or maybe even in the non-AC classrooms, if they move outdoors and it is more exposed to sun, then again it creates a problem. Then another discomfort which was understood the stages in classroom. So here what happens is internal heat gain if it is higher, wherein in terms of heat from lighting or maybe various electronic devices. Then we talk about the external heat gain, wherein the building actually absorbs the heat during the day and it just keeps on increasing the inside temperature if the design is not adequate. Then if the student density is higher, then the ambient temperature and humidity level, it actually starts increasing and it starts to feel more discomfort. So consider yourself in a room which is more congested with people. We start feeling some kind of discomfort in terms of breathing as well as in terms of temperatures also. Inadequate ventilation, if there is a low ventilation thing, then again there is a poor air quality, continuous emission of CO2 from humans as well. It also creates an issue. Now, according to National Education Policy 2020, classrooms must maintain an optimal student to classroom ratio, and it actually varies with various areas or climatic conditions and the size of the classroom. So it was also observed as per the Unified District Information System for Education, which is UDISE in 2023. It was told that around 70,000 government schools across India have a slightly higher SCR ratio. then the accumulated heat in the classroom, it needs to be flushed out through adequate ventilation in terms of electric fans. So Sugit will be talking about more of the solution criteria or solutions of these discomforts. Then 15% of the government schools in India do not actually have a functional electricity connections, which again creates more and more issues. Now, there was an analysis based on a questionnaire which was filled by teachers across various Indian cities. Around 7 Indian cities was considered, and more than 300 teachers actually filled this form. So they observed that 67% of the students actually returned home earlier. At least around 10 students per week, they returned home earlier due to heat-related illnesses. And teachers actually reported that fatigue was one of the most common heat-related issues noticed in the students, followed by restlessness as well as dehydration. And students were also observed to have a slower in work, and they were also distracted in the classroom because of this heat. Further, most of the teachers actually reported that tiredness and heavy sweating was something which was the most common complaint from the students while they were in the class, and a significant number of students also exhibited fainting, weakness, as well as headache. So now I would request actually Miss Preeti Arun. She's from Cambridge School, which is based in New Friends Colony, New Delhi. Ma'am, would you please share some impacts or examples what you're actually facing in your school?
Thank you, Nimish. In terms
Sure.
of the discomforts that students are facing, it totally coincides with what you have spoken about. And of course, I think Sugit, when he's talking about the solutions, that's the time when I can probably contribute a little more. But right now,
Sure.
the idea is that I mean, you know that there are very few fans. I mean, even if there are about 4 fans in every classroom, the the effect of the fan is not felt very much by every student in the class. So these kind of things are there, and of course the classrooms are not air conditioned. Even if they were air conditioned, I don't know how much it would help in dead dry heat. So I think most of the schools, they would agree with what you have shown over here.
So over to you, Sugit.
I think Preeti, I've just put on some images. If you would like to talk about the school itself.
Oh yeah, sure. Like Nimish said, the kind of discomfort that students feel, it's of course because of the heat outside, because of the sun's heat outside, but also because of the way the school has been designed. I mean, some of the schools, especially our school, if you can see the building here, there are hardly any shades. I mean, there is absolutely no shade around the window. So we realized once, the CSE team visited us, it was there at the back of our mind, but I think it just brought it more into perspective when you guys visited our school, and you pointed out that there was absolutely no shade on the windows, so it was leading to a lot of sunlight exposure. And if you see these parts on this picture, this particular window is huge, and it is exposed to sunlight for a very long time. And also adding to this is the metal frame, the aluminum frame. So, I mean, these add to whatever heat already exists outside. They actually trap the heat. So, if you go into any of these rooms, and in fact, there is another floor above the second arrow that you see. There is a second floor. That room really, really becomes very, very hot. So, and any amount of air conditioning doesn't help these areas again, because the heat is held on to, I think, by the room. If you go into any of these rooms, it actually feels like a very strong greenhouse with no green inside. So that is a major thing. I don't know how much air conditioning will help in such situations. So I feel that more than the air conditioning, it is the other factors that we have to look into, and I'm sure you'll be talking about those things like projection factors, some kind of shades on the windows, some kind of not just outside the window but on the window itself. If something can be done, besides things which will cool more, for example, a lot of greenery in the school. We do have a lot of green in the school, but I think it's not at the places where it's most needed. So we need more shades in the school, something that will reduce our air conditioning requirements, even if we were to put air conditioners. And the other thing is that if we have air conditioners, I don't know if it will be a viable situation. One, because it will not help much of the heat to go down. And secondly, assuming that we do put air conditioners, the amount of load that it would put on our energy consumption is going to be very high. And invariably, it will put a lot of load on the environment as well as the school finances. And quite a bit of that burden will have to be felt by the parents of the children who are coming to school. We'll have to increase the fees, and it's not very easy to increase the fee. So financial burden definitely is a big consideration as of now. So we are hoping that we can go on to applying measures which don't involve active cooling but passive cooling measures. So over to you, Sugit. If there's anything I can speak later, it would be great. But right now, I think you would be best.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Ms. Preeti. Thanks a lot for sharing what's happening in schools and what the kind of issues and tough decisions I think that schools have to make now. So let me sort of start with sharing a few of the solutions that we found. So for precautions for beating the heat, what we did was CAC analyzed a couple of heat action plans from some of the states and some of the cities, and we compiled a list of what all good practices. Not so it's not like every single city has taken every single thing into account, but we've compiled a list of what different heat action plans took up, and I'm going to share that with you. So, for example, in terms of rescheduling timing, maybe one solution was to adjust school timings to avoid hottest part of the day, closing schools during severe heat conditions or limiting hours, then limiting outdoor activities, particularly when it's peak heat hours, and avoiding open air classes, adding shade to playgrounds are some of the solutions that came about. Hydrating and cooling, perhaps some of the most important things that one can do is ensure adequate water supply in schools. Also, something as simple as relaxing the uniform norms. We always talk about climate appropriate clothing. So, relaxing uniform norms can actually help in this scenario as well. In terms of education and prevention, maybe heat protection materials and display information can be displayed in the school, posters can be distributed, etc. In terms of health and nutrition, perhaps something like having ORS, buttermilk, and other hydration methods really can help. In terms of community engagement, I think even the parents need to actually be involved. And something like bulk messaging to alert parents about severe condition will also help in these aspects. The last aspect it talked about is about infrastructure and environment, and how it says promote green campuses to reduce heat exposure, employ cool roof strategies, and develop cooling centers in schools. And this is what we will be talking about in detail. So, what are the interventions that schools can take to really beat heat during commute? Let's say during commute, one of the most simpler things that maybe the municipality or the city can do is provide shading during the commute places, so that, and we have also done this experiments by ourselves, and it was found that it can reduce the surface temperature by about 10 degrees centigrade, which is a huge thing. Now imagine yourself in a car in peak summers versus when you're in the car but you're completely shaded. Now that makes a huge difference to the way you're perceiving thermal comfort, and this is something that the municipalities or cities can do. In terms of what can happen during the school hours, the issue is, let's say, walking from classroom to, let's say, from the buses to the classroom. And some strategies such as shading or canopy of trees can again help during this commute phase. Uh, Also, something we overlook is what kind of a material is being used on the surface. So we might be using something that's concrete, uh, high material, which is able to absorb a lot of heat. But what we would rather prefer is if it's kept a little permeable. In that case, water is able to actually permeate in the ground, and because of which the direct sunlight actually gets less absorbed by the ground, and because of the evaporation that would take place through these permeable surfaces, the ambient air temperature as well as the surface temperature would actually become a little less as well. In terms of what schools can do in terms of when there are assemblies happening, rather than happening in direct sun, there could be certain sun shading devices that can actually be put forward, lightweight sun shading devices, so that some of these areas remain in shade during that time. Adequate ventilation is a very, very simple thing that can be done by schools. Now we're talking about what schools can do in terms of operations itself. So perhaps something like ensuring adequate ventilation. If that is not available, then forced ventilation through fan can also work. Another thing that has been found very useful is the use of exhaust fan. Now, if there are a lot of, imagine there are 30 students, 40 students inside a classroom, they would be producing a lot of heat by themselves. This heat would rise. And if you're able to use an exhaust fan, then perhaps what can be done is that the exhaust fan in itself can push all of this air outside. In terms of more operational interventions, which don't actually require schools to actually do anything in terms of physical infrastructure changes, let me show you some data and perhaps it'll clarify things. So we took this data. It is predicted that today at 5 a.m., the nighttime temperature would be about 27 degrees in Delhi and at 28 degrees in Jodhpur. Even though the daytime temperatures are at 34 degrees, the nighttime temperatures are much, much lower. Now, what we need to do is we need to ventilate our buildings to be able to, so that they can actually store the cools that is available during the nighttime. Now, how buildings actually work is they gain a lot of heat during the daytime. And what can work really well is that if we are able to flush our buildings through and through inside our, if we are able to flush the building with this cool nighttime air, then the cools of the nighttime air will actually be absorbed by the building. The building surfaces such as bricks, concrete, they're all heat absorbing materials or cool absorbing materials, if you might want to reverse that. Uh, and so what it happens is that if you're able to ventilate, your cools will get stored inside the building. And these are very simple measures that the school can take immediately, and you don't really require any bit of surface infrastructure to actually do anything about it. In terms of building retrofits, what we found is that, you know, uh, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. was considered the most uncomfortable hours during the school working hours. And this is exactly the same time when the sun is almost overhead and there is a lot of direct heat that is actually entering the building. And therefore, sun shading by itself actually can play a huge important part. Now, either your building can be designed that way, or your building can be retrofitted with shading solutions that are able to achieve this. So a shaded window will have a much better chance of being able to protect you from direct sunlight than unshaded windows. So we did a small analysis of thermal comfort in different cities. And out of the 552 uncomfortable hours during July and September, what we found was that in Delhi, 400 hours, about 400 hours can be actually made comfortable just by using the correct type of shading device. In Ahmedabad, this was 345. In Chennai, this is 429. Of course, this is the longer, higher range. Not every school, not every building will be able to achieve these hours, but at least it shows the potential that something as simple as sun shading devices, using this correct sun shading device, can actually put a huge can actually reduce the uncomfortable hours by a huge margin. So something as simple as sun shading devices can be retrofitted in the east and west. Maybe if you have a school which is facing east and west, and many of your buildings are facing east and west, then perhaps something that you see on the right, which is fins, will actually be able to protect your protect your building heat from coming in much better. If you're facing southern, south side, then perhaps something as simple as a chhajja will be able to do the job very well. In another thing that perhaps is very important, because most of the schools are just about 3 stories, 4 stories, or 2 stories, which means a large portion of them are affected by the heat that is not coming from the windows but actually on the roof. And some simple strategies such as cool roofs, which means making your roof more reflective, can actually play a huge part. So what needs to be done is that most of the heat that actually falls on your roof needs to be reflected, and this has a potential to be able to reduce temperatures inside the building, inside, of course, only the top floor building, by about 5 degrees centigrade in itself. And these are some of the things that can be that schools can retrofit immediately. Something by using white shiny tiles over their roof, or using some kind of reflective paints can also work in a similar way. And these are real life examples that we have seen in schools that have been very effective in being able to reduce the temperature. Other things that the school can do is, of course, something as simple as green top, which means having a green spaces above their roofs. Now, how does that work? First, it also reflects the heat, but because you have some amount of soil that is available over the rooftop, that also acts as an insulation between the heat and your building. The third thing how this works is that the plants themselves have a they do something called evapotranspiration, which means they're able to take the water, able to suck the water from the ground, in this case the roof, and they're able to use evaporation to be able to cool down that surface. And this is a very effective strategy that can be employed by schools to be able to cool down their surfaces. And again, this is also something perhaps which schools can employ to be able to teach their students and connect them better with surrounding environment and nature. Moving on more towards mechanical systems of retrofitting rather than air conditioning, perhaps something as simple as evaporative cooling can actually take place, wherein dry heat air is taken from outside, and through wetted pad, it is taken from, through a fan, it is taken inside, and cool and humid air works very well in this such an environment. So this would be most effective if it's hot and dry climate. So somewhere like we will see examples from Gujarat, parts of Maharashtra, parts of Rajasthan, where such a strategy can be very effective. And in certain months in Delhi, especially in June, maybe May and June, such a strategy can also be employed by schools. And if you're going for a new construction, then perhaps using all passive design approaches, which is microclimate enhancement through plantation, building forms, maybe using courtyard planning, or maybe using favorable orientation in which most of your buildings are either facing north or south, or using the correct kind of materials for your roofs, for your windows, for your walls. All of those things need to be taken into account. And ending with a few successful practices that have actually taken place that have actually been employed by different schools. Something like a simple water bell system that has been adopted by a lot of schools in Kerala, wherein they ring a bell thrice a day to ensure that children actually drink enough water. So that becomes a behavioral change that can be inculcated in the students. This is a very interesting initiative, which was again after Kerala adopted it, Karnataka and Telangana. Some schools in Karnataka and Telangana also started adopting this. This is an example of Sri Swami Vivekanand School. And what they have employed is they have employed an evaporative cooling technology inside their building. So the whole school is designed in a way. Now, this is in Gujarat, and parts of Gujarat have hot and dry season. Therefore, something like this works wonderfully well in such an area. In terms of Pena Foundation School and Andhra Pradesh, you can sort of see the kind of shading devices they have used to be able to bring down the heat radiation that is directly coming from the sun to directly to the earth. And there is another school in Gujarat again, which has used a courtyard sort of a typology to be able to cut down the heat. Now, this is very interesting because we can use the building in itself to be able to cut down the temperature or cut down the heat radiation coming to the open areas. So this whole school is designed on principles of courtyard, where the building in itself is able to shade this courtyard and makes this much more comfortable for students to be able to use. And there is also Delhi Public School in Bangalore, which has incorporated terracotta jalis in classroom to be able to facilitate adequate cross ventilation. Now, a place like Bangalore, where the air temperature is always already pretty favorable, all you need to do is cut down the heat. And a jali works perfectly in that sense. It is able to allow ventilation to take place while cutting down the direct sunlight coming inside the classrooms. And in the end, let me just summarize all the points in terms of what the school can do on its routine basis is modification in school timings if there are instances of heat waves, avoid overcrowding during transportation, availability of sufficient water stations, relaxing norms regarding uniform during peak summers, ensuring availability of something like an ORS, organizing awareness programs and workshops, and ensuring comfortable classrooms. How to ensure comfortable classrooms? Perhaps the most easiest ways or low cost interventions would be fan forced ventilations, night ventilation, where you purge your cool air inside your classroom during nighttime. Retrofits on schools can include sun shading, cool roofs, or green roofs. So either painting your rooftops white, adding white tiles, or having a lot of vegetation on the roofs, or something like direct evaporative cooling, particularly in climates which are more hot and dry than humid. And if you're building a new school, then passive design and strategies such as microclimate, building form, and building envelope, all of these things can be employed. With that, I think I'll hand it over to Tushita, who will be able to take you through our Green Schools program. Over to you, Tushita.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Sushita, and I am from the Green Schools program. I can see that a lot of teachers are present here. They've posted the chat box. Could you use the raise hand reaction and let me know how many of you have heard of GSP or Green Schools program? For the teachers or school representatives present here, could you please raise your hand to let me know if you've heard of GSP or if you're registered with it? Okay, I can see quite a few hands raised. Thank you so much. You can put your hands down. My co-panelists have spoken about some pertinent issues that we face in schools, in and around schools, and also some great solutions that are totally doable. Now, I want to take a step back from here and talk about measurement. And by that, I mean, how do we figure out that we have a problem that we need to work on? तो कैसे हम मेजर करके देखें कि कहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम एरियाज हैं जिनके हम सोल्यूशन ढूंढ सकते हैं and that is where the GSP audit comes into play. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So GSP audit, another click. It's a tool. You can. It's like any regular audit, but for the environment of a school campus. So you can look at it as a tool that assesses the extent to which you're observing sustainable practices, or as we like to put it, green practices. It's a lot of things. It's a robust, comprehensive analysis. It's a data collection exercise. But in this case, I think it's really fitting to call it a tool to know where you're faring well in terms of your school sustainability scenario and where you need improvement. How we do the audit is a vertical based approach. So we have 6 verticals that are in front of you: air, energy, food, land, water, and waste. And through these 6 verticals, we try to capture all the aspects of a school campus. Of course, there's an overarching theme of climate change here, and we try to connect it to everyday issues that students see in their everyday lives. But these are segregated and connected to their real life experiences, and that's how we progress on this. I will talk a bit more about what each section is about, and then how we navigate from measuring to actually improving. Next slide, please. So under air, we talk about something called window to floor ratio. I have underlined it because it's specially connected to this session, what we're discussing, and I will come back to it, what window to floor ratio is and how we calculate it. Under air, we also talk about fuel usage, commuting practices. I will quickly go over this and then come to parts that are relevant to today's webinar. Under energy, we talk about per capita energy consumption. So we actually ask you how many people are there in your school, the total school population, and then we calculate per capita energy consumption for you and tell you whether or not it's within the limit. We talk about sources of energy that a school is using. We ask you if you have any alternative sources of energy or renewable energy. Under food, which is the third vertical, we talk about the food habits that are promoted by your school. Whether or not you have junk food in the school, ultra processed packaged food, UPPF, and how frequently is the physical development of students captured. Under land, we talk about a lot of things, but land use pattern is the highlight of that section. And again, I'll come back to this. We talk about green cover and we actually do the calculation at the back end and let you know the green cover percentage of your school and also whether or not if it's within the limits. And then we also talk about different species of plants and animals that are there in your school, how you can capture the number and how it helps. Under water, we talk about consumption of water and conservation of water. Rainwater harvesting is an essential part of becoming a green school. You must harvest rainwater in order to become a green school. And then we talk about sanitation, which is another aspect that was covered in the presentation earlier, whether or not a school is providing enough water for students and enough services, enough taps. So that's something we talk about in the audit. And the last section is waste, which talks about waste generation and segregation. And it also talks about recycling and treatment of different streams of waste, such as dry waste, wet waste, biomedical waste, construction and demolition waste, sanitary waste. So this is an overall picture of the audit. I would now like to come to the aspects that are connected to today's presentation, and then I will talk about the process a bit. If you're a school that's still not familiar with GSP, how can you enroll and how can you get started with the audit? So talking about sustainable campuses, I would first like to talk about window to floor ratio and then land use pattern. Next slide, please. Window to floor ratio is the ratio of area of openable windows in a classroom to the total area of the floor. So imagine a typical classroom in your school and then imagine how much of openable area is there. You don't have to count the door. Openable windows, ventilators that you can open, and that to the total area of the floor. So that ratio is called window to floor ratio. It is a unit that indicates whether or not you have sufficient natural light and ventilation in your classroom. So there are two things that it indicates, WFR or window to floor ratio, sufficient natural light, sufficient ventilation. Now we've already learned that too little and too much of it is a problem, light and ventilation. So it should be in the perfect range. So that's something that window to floor ratio captures, which is under the air section of the audit. Now, how do we do it? So the entire audit is student-led, which means that students actually form teams, go around the campus and collect this data for us. Teachers act as facilitators. They help students whenever they're stuck, and they also help students put the data in our audit portal, which is online. But the main idea is that students should be on ground doing these hands-on activities, and calculating window to floor ratio is a perfect example of a hands-on activity in a mathematics class, let's say. So what students have to do is they have to measure the area of the floor and then openable windows and ventilators and provide us that data. We calculate the window to floor ratio for you and we let you know where you stand. The pictures that you see at the bottom are actually GSP schools carrying out the audit in their campuses, and these are students measuring the classroom area and the openable windows area. Coming to the next slide, I will talk about the second important aspect, which is land use pattern. It features in the land section of the audit. And here we first ask you the total site area of your school. After knowing how big or how small your school is, we ask you how you have divided the space, how you're using that entire space for different things, which is the land use pattern in your school. So under that, we ask you how much is your ground coverage area, which is essentially the area where you have structured buildings, concrete buildings. We ask about green landscape area that has greenery, grass, shrubs on it, but is not used for playing. Then we separately ask for play area that has grass on it, play area that is paved. So let's say a paved basketball court would be play area that is paved, but a play area where you have grass or a cricket ground if you have one, that would be a play area that has grass. We talk about surface parking area that is on the land, and then service area, which has some temporary structures like the guard room. So these are different land usage items that we have in the audit, and we ask for your school's land use pattern to let you know the green cover of your school. Again, it's in percentage. We tell you what the green cover of your school is and whether or not it's adequate. What do you have to do about it? All of that is covered in the audit. And again, these pictures are from GSP schools, where schools have provided us with the data and also the pictures of how the land use pattern is in their schools. These two are very important factors that ensure that you have a sustainable, comfortable campus in your school. Now coming to GSP audit, what it is and how you can enroll for it, so how you can measure where you stand. Could we go back to the previous slide? This is perfect timing because GSP audit is live once every year. It's an annual activity and we keep the audit open for 3 months in a year. It's not open around the year. You can register for GSP throughout the year, but audit you can only participate when it's live from our side. So the audit for this year, 2024, went live on July 15 and it closes on October 14. So that means you have to provide us the data within this time period. If you need more information on this, you can go to www.greenschoolsprogram.org, which is our website, where you will find the registration link for GSP and also the audit login link. I will quickly go over the process of GSP audit that a school has to go through. The registration link for GSP is also in the chat strip, if you're interested. So this entire program, first of all, is free of cost. We ask for data online, but for you as a school, it's a completely on-site activity because you're supposed to empower your students to go around, gather the data, and interact with different members of the school community, and then get a sustainability rating from us. Green is the highest sustainability rating that a school could receive from CSA, and that's how the name of the program, Green Schools Program. So the first step in this journey for a school is to register for GSP. If you're already registered for it, you don't have to repeat the process. Once you register, we give you a username and a password to log into your school's audit portal. Every school that's registered with GSP has a unique login portal where they provide their data to us. The next step is you log into your GSP audit portal and you understand the activities that you have to do for 6 sections. If you have submitted the audit in the previous year, you can access your reports and your data also. The next step is providing us with the data on the audit portal and submitting it within the timeline. So students collect that data for you. You are facilitating the process as the GSP coordinator or the teacher. And then you provide the data to us. We validate it. At times we visit the school to check your data. We analyze everything at the back end. That's how we are able to tell you in numbers where you stand. So it's not something vague that we give to you in your feedback report. There are numbers to track your progress and also where you stand. And then the results are declared where each school receives a sustainability rating ranging from red to orange to yellow to green, green being the highest rating that a school can get. So this was about GSP, and this is how you can take another step in making your school campus sustainable and more comfortable for your students. And this will actually let you know where you stand and what are the things that you need to work on. If you have any queries regarding GSP, I can see that there are quite a few in the chat strip already. In the next slide, we have our email ID. So any query regarding GSP, you can either write to us on support@greenschoolsprogram.org, or you can call us on the given number. So you can take a screenshot of this. And if you're interested in GSP, we'd be happy to handhold you through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tushita. So I will open the floor for questions if anybody has any. And what we can do is people can also unmute themselves, or if they feel more comfortable while writing in the chat box, you can go ahead and write it. All the panelists are on here right now.
Sudhir, I can see there's a query from Gurpreet Singh. Can we get exact number in GSP? I'm not sure what you mean by exact number, sir, but we provide you with each data point for your school in your feedback report. So if you give the data to us, we analyze it and we let you know your school's data. So your window to flow ratio in numbers, your green cover, and a lot of other aspects also.
Tushita, somebody has also asked if there are any charges involved in the Green School.
There are absolutely no charges involved. Green Schools program is completely free for schools. The registration, login, everything is free. And the link to register has already been posted in the chat box.
Okay. So let me, just to have a small discussion, let me ask the audience, what do you think is the most what is the most doable according to you? What's something that you can take forward from this webinar, and what do you think can be, something that you think can be tried off immediately, something that you feel can be done immediately by your school? So somebody has said that retrofitting of sun shading around windows to reduce heat exposure is something they can do immediately. The idea of the water well is nice, can be implemented immediately. Somebody has also said plantation is something that they feel can be immediately put forward in their school as such. Anybody would like to open up their mics and then tell us about some of these?
So I think there's one particular question is about what's the difference between green school and cool school. Maybe you can look at that.
Well, see, all of these are completely definitions or ideas that we've put forward. Green School Initiative is one initiative by CSE, which Tushita has talked about. Cool Schools is just an idea that we've put forward, that how schools can actually adapt during these heat stress times. Tushita, would you like to answer some of the questions that are pertaining to the...
Right. So, first of all, Green Schools program is only for schools. The GSP audit as an exercise is only for schools. Unfortunately, our architects or individuals cannot register for the audit because it's an audit for a school campus. We do provide sustainability rating certificates according to the rating that you receive. So that's the recommendation. As far as hand holding is concerned, which was another query in the chat box. After every audit, we provide you with a personalized feedback report, which lets you know where you need help and where you're faring well. And that's how you can work on those parameters and then progress towards becoming a green school. So that's how we handhold you. And of course, we're always there with our teams and expertise at CSE to help you. So, for example, Preeti ma'am, who's the GSP coordinator of a green school, she needed more help with the classroom structure, heat issues. So she reached out to the sustainable team, and Sugit and his team helped her out. So that obviously is a possibility if you need any specific help from us. Apart from this, I think I've covered most of the queries.
Yeah, people are also also writing that white paint or green roofs are something that they feel can immediately be done in their campus. Yeah, and the recording of the session would be available on the CSE website, so that's not an issue at all. Radishti, if you would like to add something.
No, I think it's a good summary which has been given, and I think audience have received it very well. They are putting up a lot of things which are in support of what we have been discussing on it. But now it's something which I think particular directions needs to be taken by schools on this. So I think the solution vary from school to school depending on what kind of situation is there. So there will not be thumb rules for it, but definitely there is a different kind of, you can say the checklist which is available, which we discussed as well as you are talking about also. Then we have to see what interventions could be the first one to go in there. So which can help children as well as improve the environment of the school.
The green roof and the white tiling on the roof, the window shades, etc., they're all very, very plausible solutions, which are, I think, more effective than simply installing ACs. That's, like you said the other day, it's the easier way out. So
It's the easier way out as well
but
as
it's
some.
not. I'm sorry, but it's not going to solve the entire problem anyway.
Yeah, the thing is that something like a cool roof or green roof is very, very relevant to a typology like a school, because it's a low height typology, which means there are three or four. Usually there are three or four floors. So a huge percentage is on the top floor, and this is why something like that can be immediately adopted. And as I said, I think we also saw in Cambridge School when we visited the New Friends Colony one that there are students who are engaged with the plantation activities, and that also brings them, together with the environment much in a much better way. And this is something that can be adopted by the schools.
Very doable.
Yeah. Also, to answer, the PPT would also be available on the website once we are able to create a page of this webinar. So Ms. Akanksha has written, if she would be pitching this to her schools as a parent, how would we be doing that? Any suggestions? I think if you're able to take something from the webinar, that's perfectly fine. Good. We would also be giving you all of this data. We would also be releasing a paper on this very soon, and which we would be distributing to everybody who has registered for this webinar. And perhaps that's something that you can take forward as a document that gives suggestions of what all schools can do. So we'll be coming up with the paper very soon as well. Yeah, if there are no more questions as such, then we can end this program. Anybody would like to say anything in the end? Otherwise, we can end this. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for participating and thank you for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.